Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarov's chess channel and welcome to the TCEC season 20 that's going on now these days. We have now reached the Premier Division stage, so far the engines have played this Division 4, Division 3, Division 2 and now in the Premier Division Leela C0 and Stockfish have joined the show and we'll have again some incredible games. So we're starting now with the derby of the TCEC. Anyway, it's of course Leela C0 versus Stockfish. I'm going to reveal immediately the result. So far Stockfish is in the lead. Stockfish is again playing brutal chess, and what surprised me really in this new TCEC season is that Stockfish doesn't castle anymore, which is really incredible. Stockfish plays now many times with the king in the center position, which is of course more attractive to watch, which is more of course more dangerous, and that's why I decided to show you such a game in which Stockfish played here with the white pieces against Leela C0 without castling in the same-ish attack, and it's again a really beautiful chess game. So let's check out now the game. As usual in this top engine games, we have this Mortal Kombat sound, round 1 and white. So here Stockfish opened with the move d4, knight to f6, c4. We have g6, the king's Indian, and the king's Indian can never be boring, so that's why it's a cool game. Knight to c3, bishop to g7, and now e4, getting of course a use of the pawn central control. We have now 3 advanced pawns. D6, normal idea of the king's Indian, and we have now f3, the same-ish attack. The idea of the same-ish attack is similar maybe to the Yugoslav attack against the Dragon Sicilian, if you're familiar maybe with some e4 strategies. It's similar. Basically, we're battling against this fianchetto, against this bishop on g7. We're trying bishop to e3, queen to d2, and then creating this battery, trading off the bishops, playing h4, h5, g4, and similar ideas. Try to trade off the queens on the h file and deliver checkmate with the rook and queen battery on the h file. So it's a common idea that I think you can many times use, and I think a king's Indian player is not so happy when white goes into the same attack. So castling, we have bishop to e3, knight from f to d7. The idea is clear. We want to play e5 or c5 to break this pawn chain that white has built here, and pawn chains are best to be broken in the center, so that's why we're targeting the square d4. So in the game, queen to d2 was played, c5, we have d5, advancing the pawn. There are now several positional problems for white because you have built this pawn chain on light square, so you are facing near here a bad bishop position, but still a space advantage is of course good to have, so that's why nothing went wrong. But as I said, if you're simply left with this bad bishop in the continuation of the game, if that's maybe your only winner piece on the board, and you haven't gained anything with your same-ish attack, then you could face really the bad bishop strategy. So here queen to a5, attacking the knight on c3, really keeping the pressure, and the goal is now to go a6, b5, or immediately b5 attacks, because white hasn't castled so far. White still needs at least 1, 2, or maybe 3 moves in order to secure the king. So here bishop to h6 immediately played by Stockfish. Very interesting idea. This position has been also played many times in top grandmaster level, and I think white has more success in this particular line. After bishop to h6, queen to h6, we have now queen to b4. This idea to take out the bishop on h6 is simply to deflect the queen and then attack further here the dark squares on the queen side. So queen to d2 has to be played in order to protect. Rook to b1 I think doesn't bring you so much. You could face some problems with knight to b6 if you try. You cannot play b3, you see, you cannot protect the pawn because your knight is hanging, or if you get the queen somehow, again, we'll simply take out this pawn and white could have some problems. So that's why very important move, queen to d2, we have a6, and now f4 by Stockfish NNUE. So here the move f4 keeps, I think, the position for white more flexible. Then the bishop could find some kind of an activity here, could find some kind of a path, because with the move f3 it was simply too locked out. So we have also opportunities to play something like knight to f3 and then maybe create a central pawn breakthrough with the move e5. So b5 played by Leela c0, counter attack on the queen side, knight to f3, we have knight to b6, and now b3. Here Leela c0 takes, of course, b takes c4. What we want is grab a pawn, but here comes a very important move I think you have to be familiar with, and it's really a nice liberating line here for black. The move a3 gives now, I think, here a comfortable game for white, because you cannot take the pawn here. Rook to b1 will happen, and you'll lose simply your knight on b6. So that's why Leela c0 had to retreat, queen to a5, and now we can take out this pawn. Nothing is lost. We have the same material. We haven't lost a pawn here. We have solved, I think, a little bit positional problems on the queen side, where black was, of course, attacking. So now it's time to get use of our here very nice advanced pawn structure. We want to break the position with some pawn breakthrough motifs. So bishop to g4, knight to g4, knight to h4 was played, because if you play something like, let's see, I don't know, maybe bishop to d3, then that's my point here. After something like bishop takes g4, bishop takes f3, and g takes f3, you could face really this bad bishop position. This bishop is blocked out. You have a double pawn structure. This knight, I think, will find good ways into the game. Although you could maybe break the position with e5, try to get pawn breakthrough motif, but black doesn't have to react. We don't want to take, of course, and connect the pawns again in the center. We're waiting here from black's perspective. Then we want to recapture with d takes e takes d6 again, and I think it's not such a good position here for white. So that's why knight to h4 here. Never allow this bishop to be traded for the knight. Knight to h4, and here bishop to h5. What Leela c0 is trying to do is really keep the position here on this diagonal, also preventing maybe some queenside castling ideas, because white still needs more tempi to secure the king. And now comes rook to c1. Here knight to a4, attacking the knight. Once here Leela c0 wants really to trade off more pieces to simplify the line, and now h3, threatening, of course, to lock the bishop. And now comes g5 by Leela c0. If you try something like knight to c3 to trade off the pieces, Stockfish doesn't have to take in this particular line. You can play g4 immediately. The knight is trapped anyway. You cannot move the knight, and you cannot also move the bishop. So I think in this particular case Leela c0 would lose both of these pieces. So here g5 played by Leela c0 tries to get a good square for the bishop, and we have now knight to f5. If you, for instance, take f takes g5 here, then bishop to g6 can be played. Of course, white doesn't have to play this particular line, but I wanted to point you out how you could really face a bad bishop position if you go for some trades of pieces. Knight to g6, f takes g6. This aren't really the suggested lines by the engine, but I wanted to see how problematic sometimes this same-ish attack can be for white. After something like bishop to e2, you see we can now trade off the pieces. Rook to c3, knight to d7, and maybe after bishop to g4, knight to e5. Here I think white could have some troubles to battle against this so-called Benoni knight. The Benoni knight is this very powerful defensive setup when we place it on e5, where the knight cannot be kicked away by any minor piece. So this knight will be very powerful, and I think this could be really a good game. A good game for black. So that's why after move g5, Stockfish NNUE doesn't react, plays knight to f5, attacks the e7 square. We have g takes f4, but now knight to e7 comes with a check, castling, and now queen to f4. We have f6 because you're risking here some checkmates on queen to f6. If happens, it's of course a checkmate, so that's why f6. We have king to d2, a really cool move by Stockfish, and in e stays with the king in the center, protects also the knight on c3, and then if knight takes c3 happens, we can simply take it out with the rook and also protect our a3 pawn. That's exactly what happened. Knight takes c3. We have rook takes c3, and now knight to d7. Queen to h6, sneaking in with the queen. We have also a nice good square here for our knight. It's the square c6 in the game. Knight to e5. Finally, Leela c0 cements the knight where we wanted to have, but now it's time to trade off this very, very annoying knight, because if this knight stays here, it's very risky then for for white. This knight cannot be tolerated, so that's why after knight to c6 we have b takes c6. Okay, still it's a bad king's position, but the problem is now that black cannot activate the pieces so fast. Here bishop to g6, bishop to d3, we have queen to b6, and now rook to b1. That's, I think, a very nice defensive strategy, because this rook is also a little bit stuck here. You cannot just move the rook. The rook has always to protect this f6 weakness, so doubling up rooks on the b file is also not an option here for black. Black has also some problems in front of the king. So queen to c6, we have rook to b3, queen to e8, and now comes rook to b7. If you, for instance, take here bishop to e4, in this particular case, it's a losing game immediately. It's a forced checkmate, because rook to b7, you cannot do anything. If you take out the bishop, will simply deliver checkmate. If you trade off more pieces, you see queen to b7, rook to b7. If you take again, the bishop and the queen are covering this h7, so it's again game over. So after the move rook to b3, we have queen to e8, rook to b7, rook to f7, and now g4, improving the pawn structure here, queen to f8, and now after trades of queens, we have now a very nice position, very nice endgame, because the game finally has reached the endgame stage, and this idea to stay with the king in the center was a really great one. Now the king is much more nearer to the action. You see, this king is too far away. We can now search for good activities with our king. We have occupied the only open file on the board. It's of course the b file. We have a nice bishop, and still I think this is much better for white. So rook to e8, king to f4, a5, rook to b6, attacking the d6 weakness, rook to d8, and now a4. H5, and now of course rook to a6, attacking now a new weakness in the position. It's of course the weak a5 pawn. H takes g5, h takes g5, rook to e8, rook to a7. What Stockfish is trying to do now is simplify the position. We have grabbed the pawn. We can now really force the trades of rooks, and because our king's activity, I think it's much better here to be white. So rook to e8, that's now the point, you see, because we had some troubles around the square e4, so that's why rook to a8, we have king to g7, rook takes e8, rook takes, and now we can take out this pawn. Very important move, because we don't want to take out this pawn. If we take out this pawn, then I think we can again have some troubles, although you have maybe a pass pawn situation, but this king could go towards the center, and this is basically the key pawn that we want to take, because it's also protecting the weak c5 pawn. So that's why after the move rook to d6, we have rook to b8, and now rook to d7, the check. Here f4, e5, very important to again simplify the position. Bishop takes d3, rook to d3, here king to e7, and now after e takes f6, king to f6, and now g5, we have created now a pass pawn situation, which is of course completely winning here for white. But let's see now how Stockfish played this endgame. Rook to d7, king to g6, again a check. Now the king again can move rook to b4. Here we can take out now this pawn too, and simply Stockfish NNUE pushed here this pawn, simply pushing further. The rook has now to come behind. If you try rook to c6 here immediately, it's not too good, because after rook to c6, king to c6, we can also push our pawn further. If you promote here, we'll also promote, and this is a theoretical draw, because we have also opportunities to always create some perpetual checks. So that's why after move king to d6, rook to d8, rook to d1, king to c6, again a couple of checks happens, and now g6. You see, we have now another pass pawn, which black has always to take care of. Here king to b8, here again a check, and again some checks, and after king to c6, king to d5 here in the game. A2 was played. Even if you try something like a new check, then we can again simply play king to e6, and you see now you cannot protect everything. You cannot go back. Pardon me. You cannot go back here. We will simply promote after queen rook takes rook takes e8, and rook takes e8, and after a2 still we have time to get behind the pawn and win this endgame. So after the move king to d7, a2, here the promotion, and after rook to c8 in this position, Leela c0 resigned. So incredible game again by Stockfish NNUE. Really nice attack, really nice same-ish attack. I think this defensive strategy, let's go back, I think this is something that needs to be memorized here. Very important. After move b3, b takes c4, and now a3, I think is helping out really white here on the queen side. I think from this point on it was really one-way ticket, and because we can really face sometimes in Benoni games, in Benko Gambit games, if you're familiar with the Benko Gambit, some queenside attacks by black. If you solve then the positional problems on the queen side, then you could have really a nice positional game on the king side. So that's exactly what happened in this game, and Stockfish NNUE, as I said, is now in the lead of the Premier Division of the TCEC Season 20. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. If you want to see more attacking games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series. Here is the link, and if you want to see maybe the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link, and if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.